Hi, everybody. Today, my guest is Justin Schmidt, the VP of Marketing at Capacity. And Justin is Capacity, by the way, is an enterprise artificial intelligence SaaS company that's focused on helping teams do their best work. Capacity is a new kind of help desk powered by artificial intelligence that automates support for your customers and employees. Prior to joining Capacity, Justin has spent the last 15 plus years in various marketing leadership roles with extensive experience in digital marketing and publishing operations. In each career stop, Justin has focused on bringing innovative products to market with a data-driven approach that is laser-focused on optimization. Justin lives in St. Louis with his wife and 2 children. When he's not working, he enjoys playing music, gaming, reading sci-fi, and spending time with his family. All right, Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Paris.
So, Justin, I want to start off with just understanding a little bit about your career progression to date and what has eventually brought you to Capacity. I know that you spent many years previous to Capacity, you spent many years over at Multiply. Can you just talk to me a little bit about your career progression and what you've taken from different companies along the way to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I started, when I went to college, I started as a computer science major. And, you know, at the risk of dating myself here, and in the late 90s, computer science wasn't quite as air quotes sexy as it is now. And the coursework and just the way it was taught and the possibilities that I was given as a 18-year-old kid or whatever wasn't that exciting. And I lost interest and switched to marketing. And I bring that up because that appreciation of computer science and software engineering is stuck with me throughout my journey. And that we can, as best as we can, quantitatively break down a lot of the challenges, a lot of the opportunities in marketing. So, obviously there's the creative process and messaging and some of that stuff really needs to be more qualitatively driven, but you can measure it quantitatively and you can optimize for it. So I've always sort of been in that kind of mindset. The other thing that I was very fortunate to have very early on in my career been put in leadership roles. So one of my first, quote unquote, real jobs was leading a small marketing team at a video production and e-commerce store. So being able to see the bird's eye view early on, plus having that eye towards you can optimize your way in and out of everything, really kind of put me on a path to seek opportunities where that was apparent. So, you'd mentioned a little bit when we were chatting back and forth before the show about how what it means to sort of stay at a place for a while. I mean, I was at Answers Multiply for 10 years. I was probably the 33rd employee. And I was there through all the growth up to our exit in 2014 when we sold the business for $900 million to a private equity firm. I was there during the Chapter 11, 3 years later, the emergence, six-ish months after that Chapter 11, and then ultimately left when, eventually wanted to do something else. And it was a really interesting journey to be able to apply the bird's eye view appreciation that I had from prior stops with the eye towards optimization to a very data rich opportunity to grow a business and lead a team. And that experience there, I guess the best way I could put it is like you go through something like that and you kind of lived every part of a business life cycle and you've had 5 MBAs and lived 1,000 years of life in a 10-year period, kind of going through everything we did there, the meteoric rise and the fall and the reemergence and all that. And that just really kind of put me in a position, and again, I'm very fortunate for all of this, to be able to kind of step into a new situation leading a SaaS marketing team. I don't have a ton of experience in SaaS. I've been doing it, for several years now, and I've been a customer of SaaS companies for a long time. So there's the appreciation there. But I've been very fortunate in my career to have been put in a position where I can easily apply all of these skills that I've learned over the years and take an approach that I think, in my opinion, not every marketer does. And that's really keep that eye towards the quantitative aspects of the discipline.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you're managing the team there at Capacity? And first of all, how many people are on your marketing team?
Yeah, we're a small but mighty team. So from marketing specifically, we have 4 people. There's myself. We have a director of marketing, and then a marketing specialist and a graphic designer. We then outsource our front end web development. We have an events person we work with. But one thing that's a little different about what we do, and one thing that I feel all SaaS companies should do, is we have a CRO that I report to. And in my organization, in addition to marketing, is also revenue operations. So marketing ops and sales ops report to the same director of revenue operations, reports to me. And what's really interesting about this is that, especially in B2B, marketing, traditionally, again, air quotes, traditionally, marketing's job sort of ends at the MQL, and then it's tossed over the fence to sales, and whatever happens, right? I think it's a real issue not having some portion of sales and marketing under the same leadership, because that, like, people listening to this, I'm sure everyone has heard that, there's healthy friction between sales and marketing. I think that's bullshit. You should have really tight alignment and good working relationships between sales and marketing. Putting them in the same org, or some portion of them in the same org, really helps facilitate that. And specifically on the RevOps side, visibility into down funnel stages makes a big difference, right? Like, ultimately, marketing goes out and procures leads, not to get leads. They procure leads to get customers,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's chuckling as I say this, it's so obvious, but I don't think organizational design that separates marketing and sales facilitates that. So we have sales ops reports into marketing, which I know is maybe a little unique, but the longer we've been doing it, the more I'm convinced this is the right way for teams to be organized.
Mm-hmm. How many salespeople are there?
Oh, salespeople, we have 3, 2 quota carrying account executives, and 2 ISRs assigned, sort of working with those quota carrying account executives, and then our VP of partnerships sort of works a lot of deals as well. So
Okay. Yeah.
4 or 5, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to know if I do fully agree that having an org structure that integrates marketing and sales is one of the keys to getting that alignment right. Do any of them have shared KPIs across marketing and sales functions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I kind of do, given the fact that the sales operations reports into me, but our marketing people specifically, don't. But that's not by next year. I think we will, right? Like, we're a growing small but mighty team here. We're still early in the company life cycle as a startup, and like all early stage companies, we're sort of building this airplane as we fly it. And one of the things that I think we have started to do more this year that we weren't doing as much going into the planning for 2021 and third quarter 2020 was a lot of those really tight KPI alignment. So my team is responsible for some pipeline generation, but I don't have my marketing specialist necessarily, like she doesn't, she's not gold to increase opportunity close rate necessarily, right? But this is something that I want to explore to figure out a way to align the incentives beyond, we're all trying to build a growing company here. So it's a good question, and one that I would like to explore because that alignment drives everything. And KPIs, while they can change in a startup environment, like you should still have enough rigidity, might not be the right word, but structure within your KPIs so that you really funnel people's attention towards that growth.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, I want to pivot over to the product, to
Yeah.
capacity. And one of the things that immediately struck me was that this has so many use cases, just dozens of use cases that both could be client-facing roles, for internal roles. The first question I have internally, I mean, how do you cope with that as the marketing team? You got so many use cases. You probably need to
Yeah.
generate case studies across all those use cases. How do you prioritize the use cases? And generally, how do you see the breakout? Are more people using this for customer
Yeah.
facing or internal? And how do you think about the prioritization across so many use cases?
Well, it's if I had hair, it'd be a lot of hair on fire moments, and I'm sure there's gray ones in here if I let it grow out. But um, the it's a really good question, and this is something that's been top of mind for me a lot lately. So we are in the middle of a brand repositioning. Not a rebrand. We did that a few years ago. We went from Jane.ai to Capacity and went from point solution to product suite. But the next evolution of this is into a platform. And platforms, let's take ServiceNow as an example. I could pick a million other ones, but ServiceNow is a good corollary to what we're aspiring to do. That's a platform can be used across, like it's a horizontal in nature play, but you can verticalize the implementations and the go-to-market. So when we were first putting together a lot of what ultimately ended up on our website, we said, let's launch a wide breadth of use cases and industries and like, let's set a lot of glue traps for a wide stretch of SEO effectively. And let's see what starts to matriculate in. Let's see where the sales team starts having success, and then we'll hone in and double click on the verticalizations that work. So we have a lot of use cases, a lot of internal teams, external teams. We have a lot of collateral that we made early on around that stuff. The business will ultimately grow into, I think we'll have cohorts of customers and all those plus ones that we don't have up there at all yet. But we're starting to see the veins of success, and we've pushed in further in those. And the brand repositioning I mentioned earlier, moving to a platform, literally before we got on air here, I was talking with my team and our web developer. We're launching a new menu and a bit of a taxonomy change to really focus in more on our key areas of growth, and sort of, not, for lack of a better word, deprioritize some of the stuff that is still too nascent to really earn top billing. So long story short, most of our early stage customers are using Capacity in a bit of a mixed scenario. So we've got people who are deploying the chatbot on the website, and we've got a lot of people who are deploying it internally to do workflow automations and some of the deeper platform stuff. We have a good cohort of customers in the mortgage business. That's a leading one. Education, higher education specifically, is a big growing line of business for us. And then the sort of general enterprise makes up the last bit of it. So, long-winded way of saying, we made the intentional decision to start wider, maybe a little shallower than you would like, but wanted to collect data on where are we able to sort of poke through, and then align that with what the sales team is experiencing, and the next step then is sort of connecting those two and really digging deeper into one of those veins.
Yeah, I really like that your description of moving from a point solution to a platform. I think that reframes the entire thought process around use cases. And I do like that you were open-minded enough at the beginning to say, let's, as you say, set a lot of glue traps, and also let's give SEO an opportunity to show us where we're getting traction, and let's follow the data once we start getting that data. I think that's a great mindset to have that a lot of companies don't always have, which is that in a lot of ways, let's put out the best content we can. Let's see, what Google is going to reward us or not. Let's combine that with really analyzing how our initial customers are really using the product. Yeah. And then let's just trust that process. Let's trust that it's going to show us the way.
Exactly. And not just Google, right? I mean, a hop away from Google, you have the Capterras and G2s of the world.
That's right. Yeah.
And, good for them for building a good sort of search arbitrage business with all of us SaaS companies. But
yeah,
great business. But the truth of the matter is that is a good, like, if you are going to, taste or split test the SaaS landscape, those are interesting places to look, right? Like I can tell you just from having, ran some experiments and advertising in Capterra, for example, the help desk category, way more competitive from a bid landscape perspective than something like conversational AI, right? Like, like a good late Q3 CPC on help desk in Capterra is $350, $400, $500. Where in conversational AI, like bid whatever you want, there's just not a lot of volume there. The other thing that's interesting too is sales. We run a pretty sophisticated outbound sales motion, and early on we also ran a very broad sort of high volume. Someone who grew up in the sales discipline, maybe call it like a high velocity sale outbound operation. Sent a lot of emails, pulled a lot of records out of Zoom info and ran a lot of sequences, that kind of thing. And you can kind of, touch a lot of different categories and roles and test a lot of different messaging. You can sort of use all those shots on goal to calcify what ultimately works. And one of the risks to this, and this is kind of when you said how do you manage, I kind of want to say barely, but you do end up creating maybe a lot of work for yourself and setting up that wide berth. But content these days, you can work with a good outsourcing firm to get good skeletal bones created that then you have an SME, subject matter expert, internally massage into something you're comfortable with posting. You can taste those different avenues fairly simply relative to what you could, 5, 6, 7 years ago before the content business has settled into where it is now. I think if you tried the approach we did in, say, the content farm era, if you will, of 2010 through 15 or something like that, like the results would be so shitty you wouldn't want to. Like the sophisticated B2B buyer would land on a, eHow, not to
and you're just
not to throw shade, but what I mean.
You're damaging your brand with that kind of stuff. Yeah, those days.
Exactly.
I remember them, and this was garbage content, basically.
It was garbage content, but it was real easy to get to rank.
You could do it. Yeah, and you could also buy links and point them to those pages.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fortunately, we're that's all in the rearview mirror now.
Thank goodness, right?
Yeah. I was checking you all out on G2, and it's interesting that G2 has you in a category called Q&A platforms, which I find a little bit curious.
Yeah,
Do you think you belong there, or do you think you belong in another category?
we've if any people from G2 are listening, my offer to help you create a new category called support automation still stands. Um,
Ah, okay.
yeah, it's those G2 and Capterra are it's a really interesting dynamic between those two because they're both taking, I should say Gartner and G2 are both taking very different approaches to this, right? Capterra is a CPC model. G2 is the enhanced profile and some sort of they'll give you intent data and other sort of
Yeah,
like platform data whereas Capterra is like, look, if you want if you want traffic from us, like
yeah.
we
It's
rank
pay
on
to
the
play.
keywords you want. Yeah,
Yeah.
what you tell me your bid, which I kind of appreciate in some degree because it's sort of so straightforward. Um,
Hmm.
the way they, excuse me, have created the taxonomy around their directories are just very different, right? So like when I think the first category we put ourselves in anywhere was knowledge base on Capterra. And then, their rep reaches out to me and I was like, well, we're trying to build this platform that, yada, 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 yada. How many categories can I get put in? She's like, well, how many do you think you need? And then, built out this big old document sort of like justifying our existence and all of these
Hmm.
and ran through the same process with G2. And the way G2 works, they're, maybe to their credit, they're a little more tightly controlled on where they put you. And that's
Hmm.
just sort of where we ended up.
Yeah, I see. And I have to note something here that there's only one review.
Yeah,
So,
that's, yeah. So this is another interesting thing about this, right? They have their incentivized review plot programs that they do. And I'm very curious, if you've seen any success with these, but, as someone who gets a lot of emails from them to fill out a review for my Starbucks card or whatever it is, um, we when we first set all that stuff up, we were so early on and everything that like I don't have the luxury HubSpot does where you can kind of like walk into a SaaS conference and be like, who uses HubSpot? And 4,000 people raise their hand or whatever. So
mhm.
it was harder to get reviews without like doing something black hat to get those. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So ultimately what we did was we emailed our own customer base to review us, and then we worked with them to do like some sort of lower budget program to try to get it started. And I prioritized Capterra because with Capterra I could bid my way into visibility, whereas with
Mhm.
G2 I could not. So we have more reviews on Capterra than we have on G2, but that's something I want to change. Um, just as
Mhm.
like you stack rank your priorities and you kind of tackle what you can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever tried the intent data from G2 to see if it can
Yeah,
power
that's
any
an
ABM?
G2 no, but we're a Zoom Info customer. So we got when actually we were a DiscoverOrg customer, and then
Right. Yeah,
another
they
another
merged.
that's another talk about another well run company. Um, when they merged, we got some of the intent data there, and our sales team
Mhm.
uses that, and we do as well for account selection and all the typical stuff you would expect.
Mhm. Yeah. I want to get back to the content
Yeah.
marketing approach because it sounds like you have an interesting division of labor going on between what you said, SMEs, subject matter experts who can massage a piece of content, but that the heavy lifting, you outsource that. Did I get that right?
You did. I should clarify one thing. We outsourced a lot of the base layer stuff.
Hmm.
So we outsourced, maybe a good portion of like the guides that we built,
Yeah.
and then we spent a lot of. I want to be like very clear to everybody. Like we spent a lot of time making sure what came back fit the brand voice, wasn't speaking on a turn, all that other stuff. So like they're probably 40% of the work was on our end, making sure we adequately briefed the writers that we worked with. We were real stingy about what writers and people we worked with. As the land was done there,
Hmm.
most of the stuff that we get now is from a much more tightly knit and vetted, et cetera, pool of writers. Plus, we write a bunch of stuff internally.
Mm-hmm.
So it's we do take this is probably my publishing background coming in a little bit on figuring out how to scale content.
Mm-hmm.
So it's most of what we have created in the last, call it 6-7 months, is a lot more tightly controlled, if that makes any sense. Controlled is not the right word. A lot more tightly managed.
Yeah. So you must have some writers that have, even if they're freelancers, that you've identified them and
Yes.
you've formed a team.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's important.
That's exactly right.
Over time, they're going to get to know the product better, the landscape better. It's going to make the editorial process a lot smoother.
That's exactly right. And it's it's a little work up front to find who you're going to be working with, but we have them. And one thing I'm very excited about is over time we will optimize where we see the most benefit. So it's, if you and I did a catch up here in a couple of years, there may be guides that are retired and all 301 into something else, right? When a lot of the site navigation stuff that we're rolling out today gets done, like that stuff will be deprioritized, and I think that's okay. I think it's okay to sort of like take a little bit of approach to sort of like leave the possibilities open and then start narrowing in versus the other way around. I mean, time will tell.
Yeah.
I certainly hope Capacity is successful, and I'm very invested in that success, and I believe in the product. But time will tell on the success rate here. But it's good, I think, to have an open mind to try different things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One approach that we've seen some success with our own content marketing team is when we're not really sure where we're going to get traction, we lead with some relatively shorter pieces of content so we can increase the frequency.
Yep.
Because if that had been, say, 8-10 years ago in the content farm days, I remember the days when everybody said you have to be at 500 words, and then they said you had to be at 1,000 words. I don't think any of that matters anymore. I think you can actually test shorter form, but still really on point content. But because it's shorter form, you can get it out faster, and then you can basically apply the 80-20 or the 90-10 rule, which is that maybe 10% of that stuff you'll actually see traction on, and Google's going to rank it, and you're going to see that catch. And then you build long form content on the back of just that 10%.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Get the traction.
That's exactly right. And that's why we have a lot of Q&A on within the guides that we've built, and there's a lot of just Q&A. I mean, again, like I'm biased just coming from the sort of glory days of answers.com, but people ask a lot of questions on Google, and you're exactly right. Like early on, the example I always used was, how tall is Michael Jordan? Well, the answer is 6'6", right? So like you can't necessarily make a 750 word article on Michael Jordan being 6'6". Then you'll get like an even more ludicrous example or version of what like recipe blogs are today, right? Like you have like 15 paragraphs of backstory, and then you finally get the recipe, and it's like, look, I respect the SEO game, but can we please just get right to the recipe? But I agree with you that now, from an understanding user intent and providing the best possible experience to users, Google doesn't care if you have light content on something. First off, they're just going to pull it from your site and put it straight in search results, and they'll never.
Yeah, you're not even going to
get the click anyway. But they have their data if that search worked, and if that search worked for the user because the follow up queries were such that they know they did their job. You're not going to get penalized for creating value, even if it's like snackable short form
Absolutely.
value.
Yeah. I think this whole notion of thin content, it's a thing of the past. If you have the tightest and best answer, and in some cases brevity is absolutely the way to go.
Yeah, 100%.
I think Google has their signals. If you didn't get a good experience and you have to revise your search query, I think these types of signals will say, all right, Google will rethink its instant answer here. But more and more, we had a good debate on my last podcast guest was Tim Solo of Ahrefs, and yeah, and
Great product.
excellent product. It's our favorite in our toolbox. And he seems pretty upset by the fact that Google has really stopped sending as much traffic out. And I think it's okay because on a mobile device, especially, and now the majority of searches happen on mobile, the user experience, it needs to be different. People just need those quick answers in those micro moments, and they don't necessarily want to navigate to maybe some pretty crappy mobile websites and then try to dig through 1,000 words of non-optimized, non-mobile friendly text. They don't want that experience. And I understand that Google is all about solving for the user. And I don't think Google ever made an explicit promise to any publishers anywhere that we will send you traffic as long as you let us, basically index all of your content. I don't think Google ever assumed that they made that promise, but publishers seem to have assumed that.
Well, so this is interesting. As somebody who in my prior life was very dependent on Google, and then they algoed us into a position where we ended up being very dependent on Facebook, who then algoed us into a position where, we had to do some restructuring of the business.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like I know what it's like to get hooked on the fire hose that a platform can provide. And by platform, I mean Google, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is. In B2B world, Capterra, if that's where all your leads come. And the important thing here is to diversify your channels and to create value for your prospects / customers every stage of the buyer cycle in every channel that matters. And like, you got to be flex. If you're really providing value, if you're truly providing value with your product and you truly understand your buyer's journey well enough, this might be my hot take of the day, then the channel dependency that's like your problem. You know what I mean? And there's always going to be a new channel, a new tact. I mean, think of this. 2 years ago, I wasn't getting LinkedIn conversation ads every single day offering me a DoorDash card to take a meeting, right? Now that's like that's one of the big hot tactics in B2B lead gen, right?
It is, yeah.
And eventually something else will happen. And at the end of the day, if you provide value and you understand your customer, then the content you create and the channels you distribute that in, and the leads you generate, and the talk tracks and thought leadership and all the other stuff that we do as marketers, the opportunities will open themselves up for you.
Yeah.
Don't get too dependent on anything.
I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you described, I can probably even guess on the timeline of that. So when it was pre-Facebook, these were the days when you really could crank out content, build links to it, rank it, and then you could find yourself really hooked on organic search traffic. And a lot of people had 80-90% of their traffic coming purely from organic search. And if something happened, if that fell off a cliff, they were screwed. And there were businesses that failed ultimately when
industries.
Yeah, exactly. Industries even. And I guess they always knew that they were taking that risk and things could change. But when times were good, they were really good. And then Facebook came along, and there was a window of several years of true organic reach on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And the name of the game there was just amass a huge fan base of followers, because it was akin to getting an email address. Once you've got that, you've got lifetime access to this person. Yep. Facebook started winding that down. And then, so I think the people that got a little bit, if they really got a little bit too addicted to those sources as single sources, I think that's just way too much risk. And now I guess I can see a lot of it moving to LinkedIn in the B2B space. I also get a ton of messages and things on LinkedIn now. LinkedIn, I believe, still provides pretty good organic reach. I mean, I'm experiencing it with my content, and I've heard from a lot of people also. But I think you've got to be able to look at recent history and see that the writing's on the wall, that this is a window like everything else, and it will close. and you've got to be thinking one or two steps ahead to what comes next.
Yep.
Ultimately, LinkedIn is going to try to build up its ad business. I think already the starting CPCs are in those auctions are very high in LinkedIn. So I think that they're trying to make it pretty pricey and exclusive right out of the gate. But eventually, LinkedIn organic reach is going to start winding down, and we're seeing that happening even with Instagram right now. TikTok gives you a lot of reach now, but I think these platforms are going to give this type of a reach to build up a critical mass, and then they've got to make transition to monetization, and that's when they're going to wind down that organic reach. And I think as marketers, we just have to see those patterns, because there's always going to be another platform coming that's going to challenge the status quo. And in order to break through and to get that critical mass, they've got to give that organic reach. So I see what you're saying. I mean, you really need to make sure that people are moving across these platforms, and you have to have a certain table stakes presence in all the platforms. You've got to get your content. It's got to be found in all these platforms. And then you just have to see these patterns of, all right, where should I really, as a B2B marketer right now, should I really be making most of my efforts with LinkedIn? Well, I know that I'm in this organic reach window, and it might last another year. Maybe it might last another 2 years, but then I need to keep my eye on what's coming next. Maybe that's intent data, or maybe that's some sort of first party data solution, because I think also this is going to blindside a lot of marketers in the next probably year, which is the third party cookies are going away. And a lot of people don't quite appreciate what that's really going to mean. I mean, that actually really kills remarketing.
A lot of my former colleagues, and obviously know a lot of people in the sort of media space still, like iOS 14.5 and some of the looming, when in the United States, when the Democratic and Republican senators can start agreeing on something, it's real. And like some of this like big tech, a lot of the conversations around there, a lot of the privacy forward stuff that Apple's forcing their competitors into, and et cetera, like it is going to be a rough go of it. But what's interesting though, and this is something that like as you were saying it popped in my head, what's happening here. And that's like, when you think of what a brand is, right? A brand is the intersection of a organization trying to set forth the identity and ideals of what they're doing, and the perception of those attempts by anyone not inside the organization, right? Like that's when a brand happens. So a brand is really the manifestation of perception of something. And if you really try to work to understand that and how you can apply that to all these other channels, it just gets a lot easier when you have to pivot from one to the other. And that was kind of the guiding thesis early on in Capacity, is like, we want to build a big, hairy, powerful, like this is going to be a big, powerful SaaS platform. And like, that's going to be a lot of work along the way, right? You don't get to be a multi-billion dollar SaaS company by one of two ways. Either A, you build a big platform, or B, you catch lightning in a bottle, either Zoom style, where you're, you hit this black swan event where all of a sudden your business, octuples in size or whatever it is, or you nail product market fit so well, like a Calendly or Slack or something, that like it kind of doesn't matter what you do. And I don't want to discount anything that the Calendly or Slack teams do, but like they nailed product market fit for what they're doing. The journey along the way to that multi-billion dollar big SaaS company is a platform, and like the brand that we're trying to build is what's so important there. And you got to be willing to test things and read the perception of those ideals, to my earlier point, and double click on what works and back off from what doesn't.
Yeah. I love that. That was very, very well put. And I think it's it kind of elevates you above the platforms when you have a North Star like that.
Yes.
And
yes.
And as you said, you could really move fluidly across the platforms. And if some change the rules, and it almost doesn't matter. So you're not trying to fit your brand into a particular channel and just to try to maximize that channel. I mean, you're really just you're bringing more of a, I don't know. Let's say you're bringing your content into those platforms on equal terms across all the
Exactly. And
platforms.
it's not to say marketers shouldn't take advantage of a platform and like, look, if you find yourself with a ticket on a gravy train, get on that damn thing. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
just be ready.
yeah,
When it comes off the tracks, you can find another one.
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. Uh, well, this has been fantastic, and I think really you've got some very very deep and profound views on this, and I can see why you've had the success, particularly with content marketing at Capacity.
You're too kind. Thank you.
I think you've figured out the right strategy, you've built the right team, you've got the right workflows, and you have a very deep understanding of the brand that you want to build. So, congrats on the success so far, and I'll wish you all the best going forward. So, Justin, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted me to ask you, or is there anything else that you think our audience should know?
Yeah, the one other thing that the one other stake that I've planted in the ground, that, and this is a hill I will defend. Like, you'll have to carry me off on my shield on this one. And that is, I am coming from a very like marketing, engineering, marketing, in the B2B world,
Mm-hmm.
we would call it marketing ops, and B2C and direct response and affiliate and publishing and all that. You maybe call it something slightly different, but I'm going to call it marketing ops and revenue operations for the sake of this discussion. I am convinced, after as being an outsider, coming into the SaaS world, most marketing and sales orgs are doing a massive disservice to their operations teams. And there's more like people, especially at the marketing leadership level, just sort of like refuse to bother to understand how much work goes into like a well-run Marketo Salesforce handoff, and the reporting and making sure all the leads are tracked and the data flows properly and all that stuff. I'm
Mm-hmm.
convinced that is criminally underappreciated in SaaS. So the thing that I would implore everyone to do, if they don't if they've never, I'm going to take Marketo, for example. If you've never made a Marketo program, fought with their smart campaign interface, screwed up some sort of giant change data value step and sent the wrong email, or did some sort of operational heavy lift, if you've never done that, like, get go into your sandbox environment and like learn how that thing actually works. Because the appreciation you'll have for, oh, we did a trade show and we scanned X number of badges and collected Y number of business cards. Like, I'm going to go, think of my next like tagline or whatever
Mm-hmm.
strategic direction or whatever it is that we marketing leaders pretend we're born to do, without understanding the process that goes through turning all that stuff into customers. You will miss
Mm-hmm.
so many opportunities to optimize your conversion funnel. Remember, if you have the revenue generating event for any business is ultimately what you're optimizing for. And all the steps in the funnel along that route have a conversion rate. You have a conversion rate between lead and MQL, between MQL and SQL, between SQL and opportunity, between opportunity and close. You have conversion rates between, I don't know, business case and proposal sent, or whatever you call it inside your opportunity funnel. And if you know what those conversion rates are, then you know ways you can optimize them. And before you know it, if you make a 5% increase in your lead to MQL conversion rate and a 5% increase in your opportunity close rate and a 5% increase in your SQL to opportunity. I went backwards there, but you get my point.
Yeah, sure.
You've created 15 percentage points of lift on the whole thing. Well, now I can go from, again, I'm going to be really reductive here, bidding $100 to $115 for a click. And that could be all the difference between fourth position and third position, which could be the difference in getting traffic and not, right? So all of that starts with understanding like what the hell happens once a lead comes in. And when that happens, it goes to like really smart, capable people who are, they're the marketing org equivalent of, the people in the engine room shoveling coal into the, giving it all I got. She's got, Captain. And it's just wildly important. And just having spent some time with other marketers and talking to other people in this, in the SaaS space, like maybe I'm wrong, but it does seem that the appreciation for that is lacking. And that's what I'd leave everybody with is like, make sure your marketing and sales ops people are well equipped for success. Make sure they're aligned with the goals of the large organization. Make sure they have data visibility into everywhere they need to go. Make sure they have agency to go to the marketing team and say, this isn't working. This is what I noticed. Or to the sales team and said, so-and-so is better at doing such and such than the other person. Like, let's figure out how to, you know what I mean? Like they have visibility into all that, but they need to be incentivized and activated to preach that gospel throughout the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think there's still too many silos, vertical silos across marketing and sales. People are focused on narrow KPIs and then handing off. And from my experience, these great ideas that can get you that extra 5% lift from, let's say, a lead to an MQL, or they can improve a conversion rate from 1% to 1.5% on a landing page. These can come from anywhere, and often they come from unexpected places.
100%.
But you have to have people that care enough to think about it, which means that they've got to get out of their silo.
Yes,
and they need to feel like, hey, if my ideas are welcome and I can contribute. And I spotted something where there's a lot of friction right here, and nobody caught this. I think I'm going to bring it up, and maybe we can nudge the conversion rate up here. I'm always surprised at where these ideas come from. And a lot of times they come not from marketers, from other people. And sometimes the marketers scratch their head like, that was common sense. How did we miss that one? But you've got to let everybody look at every part of the process, because you just never know. You just never know who's going to have that idea. And you let everybody contribute in as many places as they can. And they'll feel more ownership that way too. And I think that's even more motivating for those people when they're not just in a narrow silo with some narrow KPIs. Yeah, it's great advice, Justin. I think I'd love to see more SaaS companies adopt that too. I think that there's a trap to fall into the same old structure with the same old acronyms. And I think I like to challenge SaaS companies to think a little bit differently and challenge the status quo sometimes.
Yep, and it's forgivable because ultimately, with a lot of SaaS, like it's a sales process. Therefore, it's a human process. Therefore, it's a very qualitative, instinctual. We don't have the luxury that Amazon.com has from a just sheer volume and scale. And, like I would love to know how many split tests were ran.
Yeah, that was just what I was going to say. Hundreds running at any given moment.
In the last 12 months, how many split tests have they ran? And then like you think about that, since the dawn of that company, just, read anything about Jeff Bezos. That's not a guy who ignores details, right? So like,
oh yeah.
And the other thing is too, like you go from, hell, they're at the point now where you go from like visit to the package arriving at your door. And other than the dude who walked from the car to your porch, there might not have been a human hand or voice involved in any of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, it's one thing to sit there with your your master control and twist your knobs and see conversion rates go up and down and all that, when like you don't have to bring in somebody who maybe they got in a fight with their spouse the night before, the prospect didn't get a good night's sleep, and the discovery call had to get rescheduled, and then it finally did, and Zoom broke down halfway through, and their boss is chewing them out about, not getting enough proposals or going through security review properly when shopping for whatever nonsense it is. Like, these are humans trying to do their best. And like, I don't fault when a rift, whether it's there intentionally, it's visible or not, between sort of sales, marketing, and the whole thing. It just happens. And it's just something you have to work at, right? It's just like being married, right? Like marriage is amazing, or being a parent. These are all amazing things to do in your life, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to be a good parent. It takes a lot of work to be a good spouse. It takes a lot of work to be a good sales and marketing team.
Sure does. All right. Well, Justin, I think that's a good to end on that note. And I believe we both have a shared optimism for what can change. And it's been really a pleasure having this discussion with you.
Thank you, Paris.
Thanks very much for your time today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
And before we wrap up, so Justin, where can people find you online? What's the best place?
LinkedIn, Justin Schmidt. If you want to connect with me and places where my views are not necessarily that of my employer and all opinions, no retweets are not endorsements. JTron9K on Twitter and Xbox Live and PSN and Snapchat, and I've got that brand locked down.
Wow.
Whenever a new platform comes out, I immediately create an account, even if I have no intention of using it, just so I can keep my username.
And just, can you repeat it one more time? Was it
JTRON9K?
JTron9K. Wow. Yeah. That sounds like it's a future video game itself. Probably.
Well, when you create when I created my Steam account in 2001 or whenever the hell it was, like, that's what I picked.
That's cool. All right, Justin, thanks a lot. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, man.
I hope you have a great day, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Likewise. Cheers.
Thanks.